Well, gentlemen, you're first up into the barrel tonight, and hopefully our brickbats won't be too hard.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come here. We've had a long time, has had a long partnership with Washington County. And I brought, a cast on my arm, so hopefully you'll feel sorry for me at the same time. But I would tell you, as I was mentioning to somebody else, it's not nearly as bad as it looks. It actually was just a little thing that moved, but they, for the next week, I've got to kind of live with this.
Can we sign it?
No, unfortunately, it's not even, that hard, so you can't even do that. So no fun at all. One of the things that I thought I just would mention at the outset is I've got a long history working in Washington County with a lot of the citizen groups in Washington County. And my first really foray into that was with TriMet when we were working on the Westside Light Rail project. And you may not know that this week was the 15th anniversary of the opening of the Westside Light Rail project, or the Westside Next. You might even remember, I'm old enough to remember that we had a great celebration, and that included then Vice President Gore as sort of our master of ceremonies and special guest during that event. So it was a very big deal. But it also reminded me why, for example, we've done what is in front of you, which is the Westside Service Enhancement Plan. It's the last time that we at TriMet had taken a really comprehensive look at our service in Washington County was prior to the opening of that line. So it was, frankly, when you talk about planning horizons of that earlier work, it's approaching 20 years. And lo and behold, your part of the county here has changed pretty drastically in the last 20 years. Yet our service, I think, is pretty much the same as it was when we opened the Westside project. So with that as sort of bit of background, that's why Tom Mills, who's with me, was the actual primary author and, if you will, sheepherder associated with putting together this multi-interest document, which is called the Westside Service Enhancement Plan. And that's our view, together with that, reflected back from many employer groups, from many of the neighborhood association groups that I know, CPOs that I know Tom has been participating in, so many of the jurisdictions about the kind of service that we need to see on the west side in the future. And I would just maybe give just a little bit of background about TriMet in general, and then I think what I'd like to do is come back and hear any comments or thoughts that you have about the Westside Service Enhancement Plan, about our service today, or answer any sort of odd questions that you might have about TriMet service. By way of context, prior to the Great Recession, we've had a pretty good run in terms of building public transit in the Portland, Oregon metropolitan area. We had on the order of a 20-year span where we were regularly increasing service, building new MAX lines, adding service to our bus lines. But early in the 2000s, we had a first recession, and that set us back a little bit, but we were still able to pretty much keep up. But then the Great Recession hit. And guess what? We suffered some pretty severe revenue losses. Our primary revenue source at TriMet, as many of you may know, is a payroll tax, which is levied at about 0.7% of gross payroll on employers. And that revenue source grew up dramatically during the Great Recession. And so as a result, we had to reduce service about 14% overall, primarily bus service, but also MAX service. We had to raise fares, and we had to eliminate an icon in Portland, which is a free rail zone. That said, at this stage of the game, we're beginning to now come back out of the recession, and we're beginning to see some improvements. And I would tell you that those of us at TriMet are really dedicated to getting the efficient service that we lost back. And actually, I would tell you that on September 1st of this year, we added $2.1 million worth of service back within the district. Included in that, by the way, were what we considered some early wins associated with implementing this Westside Service Enhancement Plans, which included improving the service on our line 47, which runs from the from downtown Hillsborough to Rincon Station, and then a particular link from a Rincon Station up to the Intel Ronler Acres campus, and also serves points east on at Evergreen and ultimately PCC Rock Creek campus. So that was an important link to provide those linkage of our system to the jobs along Evergreen, including the new hospital that Kaiser put in place. So that was done, and we've also improved the service on line 48 as we made some adjustments there along Cornell. So those are the down payments. I would also tell you that preparing for the board another service improvement, which would be to begin to restore some of our frequent service intervals. You might remember we have a number of frequent service lines throughout the district, 12 throughout the district, which is our highest level of bus service. We promise 15-minute service throughout the day and in the evening and on weekends. And we have had to backtrack on that again during this Great Recession, where sometimes during the middle of the day or on weekends, those lines are reduced to 17 to 20-minute headways or frequencies. And we want to get those back up to 15. So we want to start that process, ideally even with the current budget year, which would, my current plan would be to do that in March. And we'll see if the board of directors feels they're in a position to make that investment in the month ahead. But that would add service, particularly to the line 57 that serves the 12th Valley Highway. That's a frequent service line, as well as the line 54, 56. Sort of Beaver Hillsdale line. So those are, I think, good improvements that really do help a lot of people who really rely on public transit in Washington County. I might note that actually if you think historically, we've continued to actually improve service in Washington County, but the Westside Service Enhancement Plan is really an attempt to step back and really judge where we should be going in the longer term. And there are some, as I noted, some short-term improvements we've already made, more that we want to make in the years ahead, but also it just gives us a roadmap for the future. And frankly, we have found that incredibly valuable as we did that, because it even helps us with our very near-term decisions, making sure that our near-term decisions are aligned with where we want to go in the long run. And because that was so valuable, we're actually now underway with two others, what we call service enhancement plans. One for the southwest sector of Washington County, the areas around Tiger, Tualatin, Sherwood, and parts of Portland as well. And so that effort is underway, and Tom is leading that effort as well. And that got started really just this last summer. And we're also doing the same thing now out in East Portland, really from more or less, if you think about 82nd Avenue East, we're doing that sector of the region as well. And our goal is to end up with service enhancement plans for the entire district, and the entire TriMet district. That really is a great roadmap for us as we move ahead, and frankly also a guide for our investments over a period of time. There's a lot of other things I guess I could go on about TriMet, but I'd probably prefer to answer your questions and hear your issues or concerns that you might want to raise with us while we're here. I would note that we're really focused a lot on cost control, and part of that has created, I would say, a pretty contentious environment with our labor union, because we're trying to control some of the labor costs associated with the benefit program that is really a very long-lived benefit program and very rich compared to our peers or even other public sector employers. And so there's a certain amount of controversy, and I also say that right now, because TriMet is a big player in transportation in this region, we're also always going to be in the headlines, and there's always going to be a chance for things to go wrong. Just a little summary note about what we do accomplish. Our ridership last year was nearly 100 million, which basically means that 100 million times last year somebody stepped across the threshold of a TriMet bus or a TriMet train. And when you add that up and you compare us to our peers around the country, it becomes very clear that we outbox our weight class. While our region, our district size is about 24th in population, we're actually number 9 in per capita ridership. So we tend to carry a lot more people than peers our size. And we do that, yes?
I'm sorry, for minutes, did you say number 9 per capita on ridership?
Right.
And then
Number
the stat before
24
that?
in total base population.
Okay, thanks.
So I think we have a successful district system. We always say, no, we can do more, and we know we can do better, and that's the ethic that I bring to the job, and certainly Tom does, and I think everyone at TriMet recognizes the responsibility we have to grow with this region and to provide a growing share of the region's transportation need. So with that, I'll pause for questions
Eric?
or comments.
I'd like to share a couple brief comments and end with a question. First, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. One of the items that I'm tracking personally with TriMet, as a CPO chair, I'm kind of a lightning rod for questions within my district. And I've got one in particular, a constituent who's a former county commissioner named Steve Lawrence, who rides me on a lot of issues. And of concern to my group especially, the lightning rod issue is the cost per ride for Wes. And that Wes as steel wheels versus rubber wheels don't seem to pencil out according to my constituents. The next comment is related to Kate Brown's audit of your organization, and that is triggering some chatter in my world, sending me emails and an occasional phone call. What I'd like to do is ask this question. Living on the south side of Cooper Mountain, CPO 6 has a large amount of new Beaverton added to it. And this annexation was done without what I'm used to for service providers when the urban growth boundary is extended. That fire district has to sign off and say we can provide service. The water district has to sign off and say we can provide service. But that wasn't the case. And on weeknights, as I come back and forth home, on Southwest 175th is the choice that UPS makes to send their North Washington County trucks to their Tualatin hub. And the roads are getting congested outside the urban growth boundary, and that this annexation was done without much of a plan for a service provision that's going to support these people, and that's a concern. And I'm wondering that the Westside plan certainly covers some of the existing developments, and the Westside corridor covers that area. But the heart of my question is this: is that we built a lot of the existing infrastructure with the premise that there'd be a Westside bypass. Politically, that's probably a no-go. What can TriMet do in order to step up and help with that need?
Well, that's a good question. Let me just I'll take the easy one first,
Okay.
which is the West cost per ride. And actually, it is high, and it's higher than I'd like it to be. But I would also tell you that every month since we've opened West, we've had an increase in ridership. And the interesting thing about West is it's really kind of a fixed cost to operate. There's not much variation in the cost of West because of the contract with the railroad. And so every time we add more riders, that cost per ride goes down. And actually, lots of time, out-of-date numbers are used. I won't remember the exact numbers, but I would tell you that the cost per ride is going down as the ridership is increasing. And actually, we've seen very healthy ridership increases, and I expect that we will continue to see that. Part of the problem that Wes had was that when we opened, frankly, in the deep, dark depths of the recession, was that Wilsonville had, a lot of Wilsonville employment zones had emptied out. And so there was no there in terms of less there than those certainly anticipated. So now as that employment is coming back, I think we're going to continue to see the ridership grow. I'd also say that it's a very small part of the TriMet budget overall. So not that every dollar isn't valuable and precious, but that, based on West, is not the way TriMet is going to, success or it's not success or failure by itself. So that was the easy one. The hard one is your other question about, can we provide some alternatives? As you know, I think Senator Starr and others helped provide some additional money for a study, and I believe the city of Hillsborough, Washington County with the city of Hillsborough will be undertaking that, and I know that we'll be a participant in that. And I want to be a very active participant in that. I think what we need to do in that regard is we'll start with the Westside Service Enhancement Plan, which I actually think one of the key principles of that was that recognizing that we do a pretty good job of getting people from Washington County into central Portland, and we do a much poorer job, frankly, of getting people within Washington County. And so that was, the premise, I think, one of the building premises beside the Westside Service Enhancement Plan. And that's how we answer the question that you posed about the Westside bypass, is we have to do a better job of moving people between destinations within Washington County. And so you're talking about 170th, or you're talking about, for example, access to the Nike campus or access to the Evergreen Employment Corridor in Hillsborough. Those are places where we can do a good job of serving those if we can begin to develop some good north-south streets in Washington County. And I know that's been, a struggle and an objective of Washington County for a long time, is to strengthen the grid of roads that you have available to use here. But I'll give some examples right now. Our 47 that I was talking about, we'd love for that line to go all the way down to South Hillsborough and serve, that whole, what is that, 230?
Well, we could either go Cornelius Pass Road, or we could go Century Boulevard. But some work needs to be done to allow us to go all the way through.
And that's a problem. Almost everywhere we go, we try to build another south-north line. There isn't a through street that really works very well for a good bus system. So part of that then is that we need a good partnership and collaboration with the county to fill in those gaps and to build in the cities, so that then we have good streets to run buses on, and to build those streets in ways that make it easily accessible for people. Part of that is also the heart of an area where I think we have to say, we know that sidewalk infrastructure is lacking, and that's another very big part of the picture of making public transit attractive. So better service within the county, providing more attractive alternatives, and the basics of good service are frequency and reliability. And I think we can do a lot, and we look forward to participating in that effort.
Thank you.
But I think the question was,
If I
would
could
you
add-
lobby for it, Westside bypass as a group?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Well, as far as the Westside bypass goes, would TriMet help lobby toward this highway, at least getting on a line on a map, let alone completion? I mean, I realize you guys are trains and buses, a few bicycles, and
Roads
everybody's
aren't our
happy, but
business.
people like cars.
Although that I would say is not something that we would do as an agency. Now, whether or not you could have that conversation with ODOT, with Metro, with the county, and with the cities, but that's not something that TriMet would do. We try to make sure that when the roads are built, that they're done in a way that are compatible and easy to use for public transit.
I just want to add, and I understand nobody's had any time to go through this, but as you go through this, as you read it, you will see that there are strategies that do address particularly the areas that you mentioned, Eric, that have been annexed in to Beaverton, the South Cooper Mountain area, and where we are talking about extending service to that area as it develops. It may, we're not necessarily taking a position on a Westside bypass, but we are saying that if nothing happens, we want to operate in that area. And then I'll tell you right now, and I think Neil would agree, if something does happen, whether it be a Westside bypass or something different, we're going to want to operate on it. We want to be part of the solution, but I think we'll also be part of the conversation of determining what exactly that solution is.
Marty, you're next.
Yeah, I've already underlined some things in this. I'm excited about a few things. Explain what you mean by new enhanced pedestrian crossings. Does that mean a light or flashing trail crossing type light?
Yes.
Yes.
And it
Either
would,
or?
and it would depend on the circumstance, as to where.
Because I've been bashing my head against the wall with Washington County trying to get 2 traffic signals on Springville Road.
Good.
And I agree with, we bash our head against some of the road agencies at times too, but actually, I would tell you that I think we're beginning to see that change a bit. I don't know if you're finding the
Their
same
bike
thing.
ped group is
Yes.
very active, and I love the comment, complete the sidewalk network on Springville Road, because it is very spotty.
But it's only up to PCC from 185th.
But they have, the bus goes the other direction on Springville too.
Yeah, but that's only line 52, which only goes as
Yeah.
far east.
These are just sample locations for
Okay,
pedestrian
okay,
improvements.
okay.
So I can't get across the street. If I get off the bus on Springville Road, I'll walk, I get off on Kaiser and I'll use the trail crossing and walk the rest of the way home.
I mean, I agree, there's huge problems, and one of the things that we have been able to do, as began over the last few years, is to begin to find little slices of money to begin to do many of these sidewalk and pedestrian improvements, and actually your county's been sort of recognizing that, and I think beginning to allocate more of their MSTP dollars and other things to some of these.
Yeah, and, some of the sidewalks are easy to fix, as I'm on the Minor Betterments Committee and the Urban Road Maintenance District Advisory Committee, and we have done a lot of sidewalk fill-in.
Mhm.
But Springville Road is a missed project.
Yeah, yeah.
Lars?
Thank you for coming tonight. I
Yes.
appreciate that very much. About a month ago, CPO 10 had a meeting, and Metro and TriMet were discussed in fairly good detail. We're not really that far out in the county because we're across the street from the Republic of Eric Squires.
Oh, thank you.
So-
You're welcome to annex.
All right, we won't, but anyway, interesting that you would mention 15 years ago that MAC started, and about 4 years ago, Westside came into being, Westside Express Express Service. And that brought up a lot of questions at our meeting, so I'm very grateful you're here tonight. Maybe I can bring back some answers to
Sure.
our meeting on Thursday night, because the original numbers have not really been met that were projected 4 years ago of the ridership. For instance, that today it is much less than that. The numbers are, well, where are they now? They're in here. Well, it only takes 0.5% of the cars, or the ridership is only 0.5% replacing traffic on 217, for instance. There's very few trips. There's only like 8 a day. The seating capacity is 158. And the cost of the ridership is subsidized to somewhere around $40 per round trip.
No, that's an out-of-date figure.
That's an out-of-date. What is the
Right.
current figure then?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't bring my normal
Okay.
book of the cost, but it's I think we're down to about $12, $13 a ride, somewhere in that range, so that'd be about
Okay.
half that number that you talked about.
Well,
And again, that's the reflection of increasing ridership, which is reducing the cost per ride for the fixed costs, the
Yeah.
dollars on top of the equation are fixed.
well, it comes back to, though,
Mhm.
if you have a strategic plan of what's going to happen, and
Mhm.
4 years ago it was made that it was going to be 2,400 riders,
Mhm.
and as of this year, it's 1,639. That's shy almost 1,000 on that small of a number. And I understand when you're saying that it's a very small part of TriMet's budget, maybe, but if it's really a looser, and my background is really in the computer industry, a large corporation for 40 years, 25 in management here in Europe. And if we had a product that didn't work, it didn't take very long before something happened and it was removed from service. So my background is not in government at all, and it operates quite differently. But I would ask you what are the future plans if the numbers don't change significantly to subsidize something that's not working? I mean, would it not be to end the pain? Because it's also pain for others commuting when the train is blocking traffic.
So let me just address that a little bit,
Okay.
which is, and I don't want to focus like laser on one little piece of the service system.
Okay.
Again, we carry on the transit system about 320,000 rides a day. So a very small proportion of those are on West. And when it comes to all of our projects, our light rail projects have regularly exceeded ridership projection, met or exceeded, and that included the Westside Light Rail project, which really met and exceeded its objectives in terms of ridership within the first year. And the day we opened that project, frankly, transit ridership in the Westside corridor doubled. So it was enormously significant. Now, related to West, I would tell you the current ridership is over 1,800 a day, so we've gone up from those numbers that you're quoting right there. And that again, that demonstrates that every month we've been seeing a bump in ridership on West. And again, we're certainly willing to continue to reevaluate that. But this was a project that was done with federal investment, so there's a certain commitment to let it, run for a while to sort of see how we are. If it wasn't growing, that would be, I think, a different story than the fact that it is growing. So I don't have a plan right now to end it, and I would also tell you that people who use it are very dedicated users. They love the service, and it's very fast. It's, what is it, about 22, 25 minutes between Beaverton and Wilsonville. So you can't match that on 217. So I do think for long term, it will be a successful product, but it is, it's going to take some time to develop. The other part of what we do is that you don't turn this like a dime, because transportation and land use are integrally linked. And to some extent, when you put a transit system in, you're committing to a long-term investment so that people will invest in the land use adjacent to that system. And when they do, then that builds ridership as well. So I don't know that that's a successful answer to your question, but.
Well, part of the question is, the projection and forecast being what it was projected to cost $65 million, and it ended up costing $161 million. Now, 217 could have been, 17 lanes for that kind of money, because it's an enormous. Well,
that's a
make
bit of an
it double.
exaggeration.
So 15. But the estimates are so far off, according from what was projected 4 years ago when it started, and the projections were probably made before the actual start of it. And the other question would be, if you were to abandon it, how long do you have to wait before you have to pay, or do you always have to pay back the federal government the funds that they contributed?
There's about a 20-year period, actually, that they insist on it operating.
And will you assure us that the new bridge and so forth on the new extension downtown, the bridge for only Max and bicycles, that projection will hold?
Yes, I can assure you that we will be at or under budget for that project right now. That project is 50% complete, and it's on time, on budget.
And it will have the ridership to support it?
I'm sure it will have the ridership to support.
Okay.
And actually, as you look at each of our Max extensions, they've been in North, I can say the same thing about them. So, again, I think what you have to do is not focus on the micro, but look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is that ridership is growing and has grown in the Portland McFarlaine dramatically over the last 20 years as the system has begun to emerge.
Okay. All right. We'll have it in a minute. Thank you for your time.
Lyles, I think you were next.
Oh, okay. First of all, I want to thank you very much for coming tonight, but I also want to thank you very much for sending Tom out to our various and individual CPOs from month to month. His presentations are always interesting. But the point I want to make is that with our population growth, with down in Tualatin, with River Terrace, with South Cooper Mountain, with South Hillsboro, and with some of our employment centers and North Hillsboro growing, Metro has growth projections, job projections, money projections, and things like that. And I know that you probably do that too as part of your organization. And the comment has been made for the Westside bypass, which is what all of these groups that, projects that I just named are sort of like gonna be connected by. I just wanna make sure that your group, if you see the city of Hillsborough or Tigard or Washington County or Tualatin kind of slowing down on transportation needs, you guys need to go shoulder to shoulder with them and kind of keep them moving to get the transportation, because with the growth that we have, and hopefully our job situation is going to improve, the transportation demand is going to have to be there,
Yep.
along with everything else.
I agree, and, you know, one of the things that transit can do is it can pull cars off the road during the busiest time of the day.
That's right.
And that really grows the system in a very inexpensive way for everybody else. But the other thing I have to, come back and remind you, really a key mission for TriMet is also to provide service to people who don't have a car, who can't afford one, or have only one per family. You know, for example, within Washington County, some of our biggest destinations are the PCC campuses, whether it be Willow Creek, Rock Creek. And providing those critical connections for people is really what we do, and what we really is very at our heart and soul is our mission, and making sure that system is there to make sure that the basic level of mobility is in place for everybody.
Thanks.
Mary, I believe you were next.
Thank you again.
Yes.
I have a question down in the weeds. When a land use application is submitted, TriMet has to weigh in on whether there is adequate bus service or not. And usually the ones, and it's actually been a while since I've looked at them, but usually there's just a box check. Yes, there's adequate service, or no, there's not. I feel it would be really useful if TriMet also included information about, is there a safe crossing to get to that bus stop? Is there safe sidewalks? Is there safe pedestrian access? I think that could be really valuable, and potentially a developer could be held responsible for putting in gaps in sidewalks.
I think that's a very good point. Tom, do you have any sort of reflections on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think that's a great idea. And I think that's something, you know, maybe we would want to work with the jurisdictions on providing that assessment. My understanding is with the land use applications, that it isn't necessarily TriMet that makes the ruling on whether there's transit service available or not. Sometimes they do submit them to us and ask us, maybe a developer who's not familiar with the transit system will ask us to fill it out. But I think a lot of times it's filled out without our input. I mean, they look at the map and see if there's a transit
I
line.
believe Washington County requires, at least in the past, they've required a statement from TriMet.
For
But
every
there's-
development, or?
I believe it's every development within the county's jurisdiction.
Okay, well,
So
I'll look
urban-
into
urban
that. I know that our
unincorporated.
capital projects folks do get those and do sometimes fill them out, but I don't know if they get every single one for every
Miles?
development in the.
They're in every development, every type 2 or type 3 or something like that.
But I'm not sure that they come to us so much as the developer fills it out.
No, I believe it needs TriMet's signature.
Yeah, it's your
Okay.
form, or a form that's either seen by you or signed.
Well,
I'll
clearly
pay
I'm the wrong
attention
person
next
to answer
time.
it, so why don't I go in and confirm that and get that information to you.
Would you
Dan.
like me to scan you a copy
No,
of
I've
those?
seen one,
Okay.
yeah. But why don't I confirm whether we are getting all of them or not, and I'll send that information to you, Dan. But yeah, that would be really cool if we could also have something in there about a safe pedestrian crossing. You know, the crossings are, while we will partner with jurisdictions to build them, they're really not in our jurisdiction. I mean, we generally don't build crossings or sidewalks. That is the county or the individual
But
city to do
if
it.
you provide them that information, and even lighting, you know, how often do you have a bus stop without lighting?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you do have a bus stop, but, you know, is it safe for people from that development to actually use?
Right, yeah.
We'll be successful, and it's not just us saying that, though, but the county itself and their staff themselves identify those as important needs
Well-
in those application processes.
And I believe the way code is written is if and I'm not sure if it's service provider, but it's if someone other than a citizen
Hmm.
indicates that there is an off-site improvement that's needed,
Mhm.
it can be conditioned on the developer.
Yeah.
So,
And there's gotta be some rules to that, though. I mean, it can't condition.
I'm sure there's.
well, there's Nolan Dolan that comes into play.
Yeah.
It, and it's not gonna be miles of sidewalk, but if it's a small gap that makes it possible.
That end of the table, you guys fight it out which
Am I
one's
next?
first.
Okay, I'll be next.
Yeah.
I'm a TriMet rider. Our family car was in an accident. There was a tree that fell on it. That wasn't the accident was the tree fell on it.
Yeah.
So it got total. Anyway, I often ride TriMet to get here to these meetings and the other CPO meetings. Today I rode down west. It was crowded, people were standing. It was 9 minutes from Tiger to Beaverton. I like it, but I see that it is growing. I've got comments and questions here.
Yeah.
As a state agency, I wonder what that effect has on TriMet with the union and PERS and the cost feature. I'm from the southwest area, Tigard area, and I feel our area is underserved. The others have extensions of max, and we're underserved. And so are you advocates going to the jurisdiction saying that we feel that you're underserved at this point? And as far as west, it seems like there's that connection that it could go right to Salem. There would be this nice train to Salem, which would make so much sense in the long run. And that's another thing, for the Southwest Max would seem to make sense. I have other little complaints, like buses leaving early before they're scheduled to leave. They leave, and that just really upsets me.
I have the same complaint.
But I was an advocate for bikes on buses back in the '80s, late '80s, and I'm really glad they're there. I see it's way overused, and is it possible we can get racks to hold 3 bikes up front?
Yeah. So let me try to take a few of those, and I'm probably gonna forget some of them along the way.
Okay,
But,
fine.
so remind me.
I've got it.
But, just in terms of the Southwest sector, and the reason Tom is at work is I agree with you, it's underserved. The area has grown dramatically, employment has grown dramatically, and our service hasn't. I think our service is still pretty much the service that was there in the late '90s. I actually lived not far from there, across the freeway in the little metropolis of River Grove for a number of years. And, the 96 was the way to get into town, it still is. It's really not changed in terms of the service pattern. The Tualatin industrial area and the Sherwood industrial area has grown dramatically in terms of number of jobs, as well as the residential areas around, between really all the way from Sherwood into Tigard and beyond. So the Southwest, Southwest Service Enhancement Plan will try to address that, and Tom will be very active over the next year with all the organizations trying to develop that. And we will be strong advocates for improving that service. Second, you should also know at the same time that Metro is leading an effort to look at high-capacity transit in the Southwest Corridor. And that's an effort that I think is, think about a decade-long kind of effort. It's going to be a long, as all of the major rail projects have been, literally long slogs of planning efforts and environmental efforts and other things. But that effort is underway right now. And it would include a high-capacity transit service, and it's not defined whether it would be bus rapid transit or light rail or some other technology, but sort of following I-5 southwest to Tigard and then down to Tualatin is the notion. And beginning to provide some of that regional connection that I think is lacking now. So those are pieces. Now, back to the smaller item about buses leaving on time. I review our service statistics at some level of detail on a pretty regular basis. And one of the things we are really after operators about is leaving early. And right now, we know that about 9% of the time they leave early. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but that really affects schedule performance throughout then the rest of that route. So we're working on that and beginning to identify those operators and trying to talk to them. One of the advantages that we have is an investment in a new AVL CAD system that sort of allows us to track with computer software the locations of the buses. And we can also then use that in a sense to identify when people leave early, even to some extent when operators are way above their peers in terms of the speed they're using on the run. So if we have people who would be more aggressive, I'll say, in driving than we would like, we will be able to identify that and then come back and have conversations with those operators. The other little question you asked was about PERS, the state agency. We're actually an independent agency. Now, our board of directors is appointed by the governor and confirmed by the state senate. They're appointed from districts. So, for example, right now we're in a district that's served by, represented by Bruce Warner, who's a resident of the Urenco area. And similarly throughout the rest of the region, 7 members on the board. So it is really locally controlled by that board of directors. The other thing I would say is that
So it's not a state agency?
So it's not an official state agency, and we're not in PERS. We've never been in PERS. So we actually have our own retirement program, and right now, all new employees at TriMet, and it's been for non-union employees for some time, go into really like a 401k program, not a defined benefit program, but a defined contribution program, as it's called. Our problem financially with the union is the historical granting of a retirement health care benefit, which is very, very generous. And that, to some extent, if we don't have the PERS problem, but we have that problem. And that is probably the most contentious thing with our union. When I took this job, our union healthcare plan was $5 copays, no employee contribution to premiums, no co-insurance, no deductibles. So it was $5 for anything. And frankly, that was not sustainable and still unsustainable. We won an arbitration about a year and a half ago that put in place still a very rich healthcare plan, but employees now have deductibles, pay 10% co-insurance. And actually right now, because of the freeze that's on, they're actually paying some of the premium for the first time. Where our non-union employees have led is to actually have a plan that's frankly much more closely aligned with what the marketplace has, which is 80% covered and 20% co-insurance with higher deductibles and plan. That's where we need to move. I would just also say the union plan is incredibly generous in the retirement health care, because a person can actually retire from TriMet at age 55 with 10 years of service and then receive that same health care benefit I described, 90/10, until they're in Medicare, and then a wraparound to achieve that same level of coverage after they're in Medicare until they are deceased. And even after that, there's some surviving spouse benefits. So some of that that's what I think has been most contentious in our union, is that we need to dial that back to something much more sustainable in the long run. Long answer. I think I covered most of your points.
The bikes on buses?
Bikes. So we have been trying out the 3-bike solution, but we have not found one yet that actually allows us to operate safely. So they extend too far out in front, and we have, as you know, in this region, some variable topography. And so we have hills and dips and other things, and we just haven't found one that works. But we'd love to find one, and so we keep hoping some very smart inventor will come up with something.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to put a schedule up at the bus stop at Brookwood Library? Because there's no schedule there. And I go
Sure.
to the library and
We can put that on the list to see.
sometimes I read it from the fairgrounds, because I take it
Yeah.
to the fairgrounds. And sometimes I'll just even walk it on the way home
Yeah.
sometimes, because from what I heard from the bus driver that drives the bus that takes it here, it tends to run late because the load on Brookwood traffic and stuff, so there's no schedule on the
Okay, yeah.
thing.
Some of our
It'd be
new
very
signs
helpful.
do have numbers to call, and the number of the bus stop is often identified, and they even, if you've got a smartphone, a QR reader.
Which I don't.
So,
I know.
So,
Are you asking for a schedule at the stop or
Or
schedules?
On the stop.
Okay, or schedules to be handed out at the library?
Well,
Like
they
a-
probably
supposed to be
haven't, but
library.
I'm just
Okay.
saying it would be nice
Okay.
if somebody dropped
I see.
somebody off there.
Okay.
There's no schedule. It looked like there might have been at one time, but just like you have at the fairgrounds, you have a schedule there.
I
But
would
there's
tell you that
none.
generally, we've been, as a cost-saving measure, not doing schedules at every stop, because that then requires every time we do a new service change to go out and change it. And that means you're changing it at every bus stop along every bus, and there's 7,000 bus stops.
Well, the Brookwood Library has a lot of people that
Yeah,
go there, so I
you know,
think
we
it-
recognize that, like, if we have a shelter, we usually put what we call a display in it. that has-
Yeah, it doesn't have anything like that there. Appreciate it, thank you.
Appreciate what we're doing. Yeah, so-
Well, in the future, are you gonna keep building Max exactly on the same format as a track going each way? Cause like, I've been to like Bangkok, you know, and they got this whole new system. Number one, they elevated, they were smart, they learned from us. And, but they actually have trains that actually make every stop, and then they have express that might pass 4 stops while the ones are off to the side.
Yes.
And so it seems like I live across the street, and my company moved out to 99th and Burnside on the east side, right on the Max train, but it takes 2 hours to get there each way. I'm not gonna spend 4 hours a day fooling around with it. In fact, I got off the bus after 2 weeks of it, I just handed it to some kids, and it says, here, you can use the rest of the month, forget it, you know, I haven't been back on since. But, I mean, are you gonna start building these things so that they're, you know, you can actually have some express to them? Cause if you go clear out to Sherwood or something like that with a new line, I mean, how many stops you can have between Sherwood and downtown Portland? 50? It takes forever.
Well, so let me tell you, I would, you know, ideally, you're right, you'd always love to have more tracks. I'd love to have 3 tracks, particularly in the segment of our system running between downtown Portland and Gateway Transit Center, because we've run a lot of trains on that, and, you know, they don't all have to stop at every stop.
Right.
So there, I think there could be segments of the system in the future where that maybe become a desirable outcome, but I don't see that near term. And, you know, frankly, the next alignment, the Portland-Milwaukee line, will actually be a very fast line. And so I think part of it is we're learning from our past experiences to reduce the number of stops, so to speak, and make the stops more, you know, sort of higher intensity stops, but fewer of them, so that the trains can progress faster.
Yeah, cause I look at it, it's just a taller, wider streetcar. I mean, it's not much different.
Well, that's
You know, I mean,
exactly right.
It's
And-
slow.
And that was the original intent of the design, was really not necessarily to be, really a whole lot different than the bus. It was a more efficient bus. Now, I think now we're kind of growing up as a region. It's really been, nearly 30 years since, we started building the first line. And so obviously our perspective and differences have changed over time.
Then my next question would be, LA's been talking about, you know, they switched over to compressed natural gas as a bus fuel.
Yes.
Because it's, you know, it's a stable market. You don't have those spikes like you do with diesel fuel.
Right.
Especially in Portland. I mean, every time they think gas is gonna go up, it goes up a dime here, diesel goes up 20 cents, you know, so, I mean, compressed natural gas, they're talking about exporting it, all over the world. I mean, why not burn it here?
Well, you're absolutely right, that, you know, and it is something we're looking at, and one of the things I'd like to do is, begin to think about whether or not we can pilot it, test it at one of our facilities, and actually, one I look at is the Burlow Garage here in Washington County. And we are working with the gas company, to see if they can establish what they call a new tariff for TriNet, which would be a different kind of tariff than industrial users or household users. The main difference, there's a small incremental price difference increase in bus prices if you move to CNG engines. That's not the issue. The issue is the cost of retrofitting each garage. And so they need to develop the systems and the mechanisms that help deliver the gas and volume. And that's probably, I can't remember, it was a couple $1 million a garage. And so if we can develop the right tariff, then Northwest Natural Gas would make that investment in order to gain the return over a period of time in terms of sales.
Those little neighborhood buses, some of them were CNG, and they used to fill up there at, I don't know, up there by Evergreen, you know?
Yeah.
But then I think they quit doing that altogether.
Well, we tried to have some natural gas buses years ago, but just to use the pejorative term, they were dogs. They did not hold up, they were not reliable, and so they didn't work. And so frankly, they've got a bad reputation from some people who have worked there for a long time. But frankly, you're right, California properties, because of air quality requirements, have moved to natural gas, and that technology has really improved dramatically. So it's something we're looking at. I would also tell you, though, that one of the other interesting things to watch related to bus technology is going to be electric buses. And we had one on the property not long ago, and I was really stunned by how much progress the technology had made. And so the question will be, I think, the race of technologies here over a period of time.
Gary, I think you were next.
Yeah. Thank you, and appreciate you guys taking your evening. I had a question or two about your compensation
Yes.
process that you inherited and the rates. And Cascade Policy Institute did some studies using TriMet's figures on a 30-year bus operator annual compensation rate compared to peer agencies. And we all know that San Francisco is not a cheap place to be. And yet you guys pay more than twice what they had for their compensation rate base hour.
That wouldn't be right. They must have factored in.
They took cost of living into it. In other words, they jacked the San Francisco cost of living into it.
Okay, well, so in other words, because cost of living was so high in San Francisco, the equivalent wage is worth a lot less in here, would indicate a whole lot less important.
The total, the total, including all benefits from San Francisco, was $47,000, and in TriMet, it was $86,000.
Including all benefits. So
Yep.
those are, I would tell you those are somewhat manipulated numbers, but let me tell you what I know to be true, and we have these numbers, and they're actually on our website if you'd like, which is that when it comes to actually cash compensation, our operators are well compensated, but they're maybe 10% over our peer agencies when you average them in terms of cash compensation, okay? In terms of cash, the annual salary, including, the provisions for overhead. So they're a little high, but it's not like out of the ballpark high. Where we have a very rich program, which I was describing with Mr. Long, is the retirement health care. And so if you take the cost of the retirement health care and prorate it back into a wage equivalent, you might get some kind of number like that, and that would skew that number. That gets to be a hard apples to apples comparison to make with other agencies, because other agencies have other benefit programs and other benefit levels that also need to be factored into those numbers.
Okay.
I would tell you, the other thing I would tell you is that our pension, even though we're trying to move people now to the 401k company, our existing pension is not the PERS problem. It is not a pension that can be spiked, and it produces for a 30-year employee maybe 50% of the replacement salary at retirement. So it's not a high level of benefit compared to other places. But on healthcare, cost of retirement healthcare, it is high, and it is way too high, and that's been the focus of why I'm not very popular with our current union.
Okay.
Do they pay,
The second half of that statement then was a comment that I made. I was in Eugene, Springfield area,
Mhm.
and I noticed that they were operating in a way that in part of their system, in a way that I had thought made a lot of sense. They had paved over the streets and had dedicated bus streets. You've got an awful lot of dedicated right-of-way out there that if it had asphalt on it, it could run buses.
Well, and that
And you know,
right-of-way-
those buses could actually go into the communities where people need to be, to get on them, to then ride to their destination.
So let me just note that those pieces of right-of-way have trains running on them, and they're pretty busy. And they actually carry 40% of our riders. So over 120,000 people a day, boardings a day on our light rail system. And that's a lot more than on Eugene's bus system. So I would tell you that actually the other thing about the rail system is that it's very cost effective for us once you have it in place. Our cost per passenger is on the order of $1.62 a ride or thereabouts. Cost for the average bus is around $3 a ride. For our best buses, it's around $2.50 a ride. So we get a benefit from an operating cost standpoint with light rail. So we actually do a lot more service with light rail than we do with buses. Now, to your point about sharing the right-of-way, we do share the right-of-way in a number of areas. On the Steel Bridge, on the new Portland-Milwaukee Bridge, we'll carry not only light rail, we'll carry streetcar, it will carry 3 of our major southeast bus lines, as well as bicycles and pedestrians. And we carry buses on the downtown and light rail on downtown Portland Transit Mall where we share right-of-way on a regular basis. So that is a strategy that we are using regularly throughout the system where there are choke points, and we want to make sure we get the buses through the traffic as well.
I think I'm going to go back to one of Rex's comments that it's 2 hours from here to where he works on the bus. But part of that occurs because he lives here and, you know, the choo-choo's over there someplace, and it takes him a long time. He's going to ride the bus, to ride the bus, to ride the bus. And that's really not service. That's disservice in many ways. You could accumulate a lot more riders if it were convenient for them. Heck, I might even ride the bus into downtown, or you know, if it were convenient for me. But it's not. You know, I have to drive my vehicle for 5 miles before I can get to a bus.
So I made my pitch. So.
Might be more efficient, but not convenient.
And I would tell you that in each of the corridor studies that we do, we look at those alternatives, and that's what the alternatives that will be looked at, for example, in the Southwest corridor. And we do look at those variations in busways that might have buses peel off and so do local service or concentrated service. But what I would tell you is that in all of those studies, we've ended up with a choice of light rail for very scientifically oriented reasons in terms of ridership results and land use results, and in terms of actually increasing numbers of riders in the corridor. So one of the things that you may not appreciate, but is actually true when you measure travel behavior, is people respond more positively to light rail than they do to a bus. Now, I don't ride a light rail on a regular basis to and from work, but I ride a bus, so I don't see the difference. But that is a bias that is embedded in travel behavior right now.
I would just also add that every time we build a light rail extension, including West, which is commuter rail, it isn't just TriMet that makes that decision. That is a process. Actually, we don't even run the planning process. Metro runs the planning process, but included in that planning process are the counties, the jurisdictions, and extensive outreach to communities occurs. So I would say that if I would encourage all of you to get involved in particularly what's happening now with the Southwest Corridor study, and get plugged into that if you can, and express your view, whether you prefer light rail, whether you prefer busways, whether you prefer nothing at all, and keep things the way they are. That's the best way to have an effect. It's not just TriMet. We build it and we operate it, but we don't make final decisions on it. We are one player of many.
Very well said.
Good, and we appreciate that, and we are running a little low on time, so if we could finish up with the last couple of questions, wrap it up about 5 after, it'd be great.
Oh, well, one of the reasons people find the rail systems a little bit better is because half the bus stops are mud puddle all winter. But my real question was, are the union employees that seem to be on the ugly side of life right now, are they paying Social Security and Medicare taxes?
Yes.
Oh, they are, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because see, like my father was a safety employee, so he never paid into any of those.
Oh, no.
So he's not eligible for Medicare or anything like that, so when Schwarzenegger wanted to cut everybody off down in California, I mean, you had a lot of pissed off old cops, you know, which equates to young cops, which, you know, didn't make his life, you know, too pleasant, so they do
So
pay.
They do pay, and
Okay.
they are members of, or eligible for those, the Medicare benefit as well as Social Security benefit.
Oh, okay.
And related to the mud puddles, you know, I couldn't agree more. One of the major things that is an impediment to using public transit is lousy sidewalks and not having safe places for people to walk and wait. So that has been one of the emphasis that we've been placing around the region.
At Springville and 185th, the bus stop is a wide plank across the ditch.
Yeah, we got them over here on 197th that are, there's actually a ditch there about this much road and people stand in people's driveways.
And I'll tell you, it is, you know, I don't mean, when you're talking about our operators, I would tell you that they have a very challenging job.
Oh, yeah.
I always want to sort of make sure I express the appreciation for what they do and the hard job that they have, as well as over our maintenance staff and others. You know, I have to be sort of the economic reality demon occasionally about these things, but nonetheless, I think they do a great job. But I've had operators come up to me saying, you know, we do something about these sidewalks, because I tell customers, I let them off in a ditch and I feel so terrible about it.
Oh, they must be in Loa.
Or they have an elderly passenger who really needs a little bit of help, and I've had some operators tell me they have to sort of park the bus essentially on the road and get off and help these people, because you can't bring a bus down low enough to really be helpful when there's not a curb. So that tends to be anything you can do, you know, communities and advocacy in the road maintenance area, the MSTAP projects have really improved what I call it really the basic infrastructure of the city, which is a sidewalk. And we've really built, as you well know, large swaths of our city without that. And we need
Well,
to-
see, I was on a MISTIP
Yeah,
project.
yeah, that's another one.
I was a citizen advisor on a MISTIP project, and I asked Vince if it was only gonna have 2 lanes each way and a center turn lane, and it's got a bus stop over here, or bus stops on 185th. I says, if we put the cutouts in, and the county goes, oh no, TriMet hates those, they don't want those. You know, but then I talk to people at TriMet and they go, oh, we love those. So it's like, well, it's the guy that has to pay for it lies about it, or do you guys lie about it? Who lies about it?
Well, let me tell you that here's the truth about it. And they're called pullouts.
Right.
And they're convenient for pulling out of traffic, and they're convenient for those who are in the car driving behind the bus, because they can continue.
The conduit stays open.
The difficulty for us is then when we want to get back into traffic, we oftentimes have struggled to get back into traffic, and you do that, you have that problem for a few stops, and before you know it, you're running behind schedule. So I think really the
That's a
ideal
law
situation.
enforcement issue, it's not a practicality issue.
Well, but practically speaking, law enforcement can't be everywhere, and so we're going to run into that problem. So I think the real preference that seems to work for everyone is kind of somewhere in between, where we can pull off and have enough shoulder going between the sidewalk and the lane stripe to mostly get out of the road, but still have a little bit of our bus kind of sticking there. Cars can get by us, but then we can get back into the road pretty rapidly. And it seems to work for auto drivers who are behind us, and it works for our operators. you know, if a jurisdiction builds the pullouts, we'll use them, but we don't necessarily ask for them because it does prevent, it makes it hard for us to get back in traffic and we run late.
Well, very good. Thank you, gentlemen. We really appreciate you coming tonight.
Thank you
And,
for all
uh,
your questions and comments. I appreciate it. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.